Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney Lawless. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and today I'm excited to welcome Darice Clark. And Darice is an astrologer. She's a psychic, she's a healer, she has her own YouTube channel, and she also has a community. And this is a wonderful time for community, so I highly encourage you just to check it out. What we're going to be talking about today with Darice is how to prepare for 2025 and maybe get organized in the new year. So she's got some good astrologically based advice for us all. So welcome, Darice.
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me on your channel. I love your channel. You have so many amazing people on. So it's definitely an honor to be here.
Yeah. Well, I like, she just launched her channel, so it's brand new. So, go support somebody who's just getting started, and you can get in on the ground floor, and she's got some great information. So I was like, yeah, this looks great. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I guess I could back up a little bit. I've in the past I've worked in sales. I was an executive assistant. I've done a lot of stuff around planning my own stuff, helping other people plan their things. And I found the planning and productivity space, first of all, to be super yang, like very male, very like go, 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 make the most of every minute, get up at 5 a.m., have these complicated morning routine. And I tried all that stuff and
Oh
it was
yes, I've done
effective.
the wake up at 5 a.m. I didn't exactly didn't drink the Soylent shakes, but I am familiar with the, ridiculous routine, but I have done the fasting, and yes, exactly. It's not exactly loving for your body.
Exactly. And so I said, there's got to be a way to be more productive, but in a way that's easy on the nervous system. And what happened to me was a happy accident. Like at the time, I was trying to figure out how to do things in an easier way. I also got more into astrology. I'd always followed it off and on, mostly my sun sign because I wasn't aware of my rising sign or my moon sign or any of that stuff. But I learned all of that in like 2022, and as I was learning more about that and how to work with the cycles of the moon, when the moon is in an astrological sign, like when I started planning my days around the astrology transit and combine that with the planning and productivity principles I'd read about in the past, like things like Franklin Covey, the one thing, stuff that's really popular in that space. Once I married the two, everything opened up for me. It became so much easier and
Interesting.
my body relaxed, my nervous system relaxed. And so the more I practice it, the easier it's gotten for me. And I'm so much more effective and I'm actually enjoying myself. And the other bonus was that like I enjoy my downtime now. Like in the past, I would still be running in my head, like, oh, I need to be doing XYZ. And I know I'm supposed to take a day off and I know I'm supposed to like relax and refuel, but I still haven't done XYZ. And just learning to work with these cycles, like it lifted that guilt.
So when you work with the cycles, are you talking about like you're working with the moon cycles? Are you working with your specific chart or a client's specific chart and kind of customizing what they need for, what's going to help them? Because someone like me with a Virgo moon might not be the same with someone with a Pisces moon, right? So how do you incorporate the astrology?
Well, mostly like I do on my YouTube channel, I start with the general mundane transits that are happening and I give people suggestions around that. And also, I have a Substack that I do twice a month, and I usually break that down for people, like suggested items for people to do. So, for example, this past Mercury retrograde, I introduced to people the idea of the double shutdown. And what that is like you set an alarm. So, say your day ends at 5, you have a day job or even your own business. If you set an alarm for 4 p.m., from 4 to 5, you have a chance to wrap up your day. You get to look at all the things you got done, what you didn't get done, what needs to get done the next day. It gives you time to decide, okay, what's going to be my priority for tomorrow. That way, when your alarm goes off at 5 p.m., where you have to actually leave, you're not rushing to do all of that in like 5 to 10, 15 minutes. Especially when people do that during the holiday season, they're running errands for the holidays, they're on the way to the holiday party, they're going to meet up with friends. So, giving yourself that extra hour to like really figure out, okay, how am I going to wrap up my day is really helpful. And a Mercury retrograde, where you're redoing things, where you're reviewing things, that's a great season to implement that one practice. So I would recommend to people during the last Mercury retrograde, just practice the double shutdown for like 2, 3 weeks and see what that does for your day and your schedule.
Okay, so basically, kind of what you've sort of discovered is looking at the transits that are impacting all of us, that then we can kind of just know what the quality of the energy is in the cosmos, and then kind of constructively and practically work with it.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. So what tips do you have for 2025? What's on your radar that, could be helpful for people?
Okay, I figure we just kind of go by it month by month, and if you can stop me as you have questions or things come up, and I also want to get your feedback too on some of the things I might be suggesting to people as well. So I think it'll
Okay,
be fun.
fantastic. So are we starting with January then?
Yeah, let's just start with January.
Okay, so this is great. This could be something that people can come back to and refer to all year long and just kind of look at what is the flavor and the quality of this time, each month. And I'll put some timestamps down so then people can come back and refer to it and think of some really practical things. That's what I love, and that is the kind of astrology I do too, which isn't so much up in the, this is trying this square quadrant,
Exactly.
like that stuff's there and that's all very valuable. And so don't want to knock
Right.
astrologers that do that, because you can really learn a lot. But the kind I do is about like very practical solutions too. So I think that's probably why we like each other's work. So okay, let's look at January.
Yeah, I refer to all of that stuff as astrocalculus.
Right. Yeah, I get lost sometimes with it myself. Even though I've been studying for 20 years, I still am like, wait a minute, what? Wait, hold on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I
not
was
my.
going to say, we have January, and so that's Capricorn season, but we also have the backdrop of the current Mars retrograde. And actually, what I think about, just to talk about overall for at least the first half of January, I mean, the first half of 2025, what I find fascinating and beautiful about the universe is that we've just entered Pluto into Aquarius. We're in Mars retrograde, and that's going to end February 23rd. But then in March, we go into a Venus retrograde, and then we also have the big transits, happening, with Neptune entering Aries, Uranus entering Gemini. I think there's something really beautiful about having the Mars retrograde and the Venus retrograde happen right before those things happen, because I think of the Mars retrograde as helping us heal our inner wounded masculine.
Mm,
And
okay.
I think of Venus retrogrades as an opportunity to heal our inner wounded feminine.
That's very powerful. I mean, both are very powerful, and I think they do both offer that opportunity if you have that consciousness to look and see, wow, where do I need to slow down and maybe not be so externally focused with the Mars, but then with Venus, maybe where do I need to be less giving or more less receptive, and I need to be a little bit more assertive. So that's an interesting observation. Okay, so January, you're kind of the things that are on your radar is Capricorn and moving into Aquarius, and then the Mars retrograde. Those are the big.
Right. And so I feel like January is a really good opportunity to set up your healing system. So, like, especially because I think this year and the next couple of years in particular are going to be really difficult individually and collectively. And I feel like it's a good opportunity to let's set up your self care. Like, if you don't have a therapist you like, or if you don't have a therapist at all, if you don't have a healthcare routine, like your nutrition and your exercise. And yes, a lot of people go into January saying, okay, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to do this exercise thing. And if you want to take that on, that's great. I'm just inviting people to do that in this context of healing that inner wounded masculine and that inner wounded feminine. And also, I feel like 2025 is asking us to do a lot of shadow work so that we can be prepared for the bigger transits that are going to happen in 2026. Like, I think the overall theme of 2025 is let's get our own internal house in order so that we can have a really firm foundation as we go into Pluto and Aquarius in a more deeper, transformative way.
Yeah, I think that a lot of us are feeling intuitively that it is a time to go within. And, we, a lot, especially those of us that have been really working so hard toward a goal that, didn't happen, right?
Yes.
Like those of us that were very much like really banking on, you know, being able to be more constructive in 2025 on like, on a global country level, it's gonna play out differently. And so I think intuitively or instinctively, a lot of us in that camp have just kind of pulled within and said, okay, this is what's happening. So I've tried to affect change in the outer world. It hasn't happened. And so there's something bigger going on. So now the best use of my energy is really getting my house in order, like you said. And you can get your house in order. Everybody always has we put on 5 pounds at Christmas. So yes, exercise and, losing 5 pounds, that's all important and good. But how can you go a little bit deeper? And I'm hearing that's what you're saying, which is like, we're going to be coming up against some really powerful changes. And we want to be prepared for that internally. We want to have a solid foundation. So things like therapy, things like um, getting a reading, an astrology reading, joining
Mhm.
communities, also, taking classes, anything that will help you understand your own authentic self better. I think that's perfect. Okay.
Yeah, energy healing work, any somatic healing work. January is a good time to begin looking at those things, implementing them. But even on a practical way, a more practical manner too, in terms of actual specific planning. I refer to getting started routines versus a morning routine. Just because some people they work nights, they work different hours. So maybe your day starts at like 10 p.m. It's still good to have what I call a getting started routine. And January is a good time to come up with that. And it could be something simple, like just 2 or 3 things that you do. It doesn't have to take a full hour. It can just be 20 minutes, maybe like 5 minutes of journaling when you first wake up. Some people like to do morning pages. I usually start my morning off with meditation, a chanting for like 15, 20 minutes. And then, I'll either write down my dreams or I'll do some journaling. And that's basically it. And then I'll do whatever exercise I want to do. Sometimes I do like yin yoga, something really gentle and restorative for like 15, 20 minutes. And that's on the days when I have an hour for a morning routine, but I don't always have that time.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
Capricorn is all about routines.
mhm,
Capricorn is about how to ground into and also set goals. So it's
exactly.
like really using that Capricorn energy to ground into and set goals for yourself, create a routine, and then uh, recognize that this is a time of healing. So
Exactly.
yeah. All right. So what do we got for February?
Well, before we move to February, the other thing I was going to say is also you can implement what I call a winding down routine or a nighttime routine.
Okay.
Because a lot of people don't realize that what sets you up for having a good getting started routine or a good morning routine is what you do before you go to sleep. Like that helps you get enough rest, like 7, 8 hours, so that you can actually wake up and do that routine. Because normally that's where people get off if you don't have a consistent nighttime routine. So are you shutting down? Are you disconnecting from the devices? And I'm not very good at it. Like what I do
I was
now
gonna say,
is
uh-oh.
I at least watch calming things on YouTube like a half hour before I go to bed. And like I'm not doom scrolling and I'm not emailing and I'm not texting people, but I'm not completely off my devices. Or I'll listen to something on Audible that I know is going to help me relax and fall asleep. Eventually I'll get to the point where I can like turn it all off and actually read a physical book. And
Right.
maybe that's my intention for January for me, just to have a healthier winding down routine.
Yeah, I think I would definitely like to incorporate that into my January where there's like a little bit of, you know, meditation for even 10 minutes and some stretching just to, like you said, get off the electronics. So,
Exactly. And February, again, I think it's a good time to do healing workshops, either actually attend them or if you're a coach or healer. February is a great time, I think, to actually offer those workshops to people since we do have Mars going direct at the end of it. But it's right before March, which has the Venus retrograde and the eclipses.
Ooh, we're gonna have to talk about the eclipses.
Exactly.
Oh my
You
God,
know,
there's always something going on in the sky.
yeah,
Okay, so January we're making plans, we're creating routines, we're signing up for classes and workshops, but then February we're starting to implement a little bit more and
exactly.
taking those. And it's kind of the same theme for February, would you say? It's just
Well,
kind of
I also think it's another good time to look at how you work, while we're still at the end of that Mars retrograde. If you want to reevaluate how you're doing your work, how you're setting up your systems for your work. Um, are you getting the value you want from your work? Does your work express your individual and spiritual values?
so February is kind of Aquarius Pisces
Yes,
energy. And so Aquarius definitely is about, it's an air sign. So it is about thinking and it's about kind of coming up with some new way of doing things. So maybe, yeah, definitely like a time for like retooling and thinking
exactly.
through. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. And then that brings us to March, the
Okay.
heavy hitter. Yeah, because we're coming off of that Mars retrograde. It's still going to be in its post shadow period, but then we have the Venus retrograde, and then we also have the eclipses. And so I'm in that camp where I don't start anything major or new during eclipse seasons. Like I don't launch things during eclipse season. Like I wouldn't recommend that. But I think it's a great time to be planning those things for later on in 2025. It's also in a Venus retrograde too for business owners. I think it's a great time to review your branding, what your business looks like, your website, your promotional materials. It's a great time to look at your own personal upgrade, like if you want to redo your wardrobe, your hair, your makeup. I think Venus retrogrades are great times to do that for business owners in particular.
Yeah. And it's also a good time to reevaluate your finances and financial planning.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
we probably have an interesting, we're gonna have an interesting transition here and, financially, wow, everything's up in the air, right? And so March may be the time where we start to see on a bigger global level what the financial repercussions of a new administration are going to be. And so then we can kind of, Venus does isn't directly tied to finances, but it really does kind of play into our security and wanting to feel secure. So taking a look at how that relates for you. Like, how can you know, set aside a little bit more every month, or maybe you can't. And so, what do you need to do? Do you actually need to, reach out to somebody and talk to them about merging finances? Or, there's just really kind of reviewing how the year is going to look. Is that would you agree
Yeah.
with that?
Absolutely. And January and February are also good times too to or at least research bookkeepers, financial accounting systems. And, if you don't have a system that you like, you can at least do the research in January and February. I just wouldn't actually sign a contract with anybody until after Mars has gone direct. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah. And then that's also going to be tax time. Everyone's going to be preparing
Hmm.
taxes for in Venus retrograde, which I don't love. But
Yeah, which is why you might want to get a jump on it. You can start preparing in February.
right, right. Yeah, and in Venus is retrograde, there is kind of a sense of just it's more relationship oriented and is
Yes.
evaluating your relationships, taking stock. So also it could be a really nice time like to look into like couples therapy because what you said
Yes.
sort of about like also like where does the feminine, the wounded masculine is something that we've had to look at and we're going to continue. This is going to be a big journey, I think, in the year ahead, next couple of years
Absolutely.
ahead. But Venus retrograde, establishing patterns within your own relationship. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and I forgot the other thing that I would recommend people do in Q1 of 2025 is to begin strategizing any reorganization projects you have, like any big decluttering projects. Like if you want to renovate a part of your house, if you want to redo the garage or create a space for an office somewhere. You can begin planning those things in January, February, but I wouldn't actually implement them until April, like after Venus has gone direct.
Yeah.
So you can sign the contracts, and plus you want to get that stuff done before we have the Mercury retrogrades coming up and all that good stuff as well. Because I think we also have that in March. Yeah, we have our Mercury retrograde. So you can, sign the contracts in January, February, but don't actually have the work start till April would, I think, be ideal for people.
Yeah, I kind of see the quality of Q1 definitely still being, like you said, just much more internal, much more about taking care of your own internal authentic self and, your family, your world, your small world, right? Um,
Exactly.
okay, so let's talk about the eclipses. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's interesting too, because we're transitioning over from that Libra Aries eclipse cycle into the Virgo Pisces eclipses. And so I think it amplifies that feeling of still being in transition or between spaces. And I think by March, it'll be more clear. Like by then, I think you'll know what you were learning and wrapping up from the Libra Aries eclipse series, and you're going to see what areas are going to be impacted by the Virgo Pisces eclipses. And I think March is going to illuminate that for people.
Yeah. And so when we look at eclipses, it's always good to look and see where Virgo and Pisces are in your own chart, because then that can give you kind of some hints about where there might be some shakeup or some surprises or unexpected news in your own life. So whichever house those are in, that could need a little extra attention.
Exactly. Yeah, and I just like to see what happens during eclipse season. Like I try not to plan too much, or I look at what areas it's going to be impacting in my chart, and then I just say, okay, I'm just going to wait for the universe to show me what I need to know.
Yeah. And it will. It will. That's the
It
cool
always
thing.
does.
It kind of becomes like things that are not on your radar suddenly become on your radar during eclipse season. So,
Absolutely.
okay, so April. So April now we're coming into spring. We've got Aries energy,
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
moving Aries Taurus. So what's your thinking for April?
Well, I think May is big because Saturn enters Aries. Like that's huge. I believe that's May 24th, and also Pluto's going to be going retrograde May 4th. So I'm like, what is that energy going to be like? What are your thoughts about those two happening in the same month?
Well, so I think when we get to May, so would you say that April definitely like is kind of similar to March, where you're, kind of still just planning, reviewing, tax time, or is there anything specific about April? Because I agree with you. I think May is going to start the acceleration. Like suddenly we're
Hmm.
going to understand what 2025 is about, and it's going to be more external. But is there anything in April like you would say that it's important to prepare for May?
Oh, that's a good question. I was thinking maybe April is a good month to try to wrap something up. Like if you've already started something earlier in the year, like I'm gonna do what I can to wrap up stuff by the end of April. That way I have May kind of open and clear. That way, if there is something big that I need to process, I'm going to have the space to process it. So I feel like April's a good month to get stuff done.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. Where, we've kind of are a little bit more internal, but here things have moved forward. And I think it's sort of a warm up, like you're saying, for May, where once things begin to move into Aries, Aries is the planet of action. Aries is
Hmm.
the warrior sign. Aries is about finding, inner courage. And it's really sometimes just Aries that goes forward without thinking. And so once we have Saturn doesn't really like to be in Pisces. It's way too much of a confusing energy when you've got restrictions and expansion of your mind and possibilities and delusions, and Saturn likes things practical. So Saturn in Pisces has been, and we've got a little bit more of it, but to what your point being, Saturn moving into Aries, Saturn's going to be a little happier. Saturn's going to be like, all right, it's on, let's get going, like we've got work to do. It's going to be like enough of the pondering and enough of the releasing and the surrender. We've got real work to do. And so some of the caution with Saturn in Aries is things are just going to start to move very quickly, but we can actually get things accomplished. Like we'll see things put into place. There'll be less of the confusion, but it'll just start to go, and if you're not ready to go with it, it's going to leave you behind. That's a little bit of how I feel about it.
Right, which is why I really feel like the first half of the year, the more of your shadow work you can do, the easier the second half of 2025 will be.
Right, right. Because that's the thing. Nothing gets accomplished in this world unless we recognize that we have a role in it. And the reality is we can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. And so yes, like doing our own inner work and knowing that other people may not be doing it at the same time we are. And we have to accept that, but just know that it will make it easier for us in the long run. It does make life more fulfilling. So yeah, and then with Neptune in Aries, that's going to be also another gigantic seismic shift because we've had Neptune in Pisces since I believe 2011,
Yep.
2011, 2012. And so we've been under this time where Neptune likes to be in Pisces, but at the same time we've seen a little bit of the things fall apart during Neptune and Pisces. I think we can all kind of reflect on the past decade and say, wow, how did we get here? Like, how did the addiction crisis go crazy? How did, homelessness go crazy? How did fake news and delusion, like these are all Pisces Neptune themes. But also, expansion of astrology and people really looking forward to so I think what we're going to see with Neptune in Aries is, people are going to have more strength behind their convictions. And so if you have a healthy Neptune and it's about loving your neighbor and compassion and empathy, I think that that's going to be really positive. I think if you are really, really fundamental religion and you're on a crusade, that's also a possibility. So we're going to just see a lot of forward movement. So I think in May, what my thing would be like, okay, it's going. Now we have the information, we know what's happening. How do we adjust to that? So what do you think more on a personal level you suggest for May?
Well, I feel like a lot of that Neptune and Pisces has been, we had to have what they say in a lot of personal development circles, you got to have the breakdown before you have the breakthrough.
Think there's been a lot of people having some breakdowns. That's what I've seen. A lot of breakdowns.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So
But
do
I
you
think
see
Saturn
May
and
as
Aries
kind
will
of a
help us pick
breakthrough
up
month?
the pieces.
Yeah, so you see May is really like a breakthrough month where suddenly like we can get things accomplished. We understand, like the fog lifts a little bit
Yes.
more and we can become a little bit more external, connecting with other people. Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. So June.
Jupiter enters Cancer, where it's exalted and happy.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jupiter in
So,
Cancer, that's a big one. I just wrote an article for Open Magazine about that. So what do you say on a personal level for that?
yeah, that's a good month to get a lot of stuff done. So if you want to launch things, a new book, a new course, that's one of the months of the year where I think it's really good energy for that. If you want to like just if you need a month to like get something out there, I feel like June is the month to do it in.
Yeah, Jupiter in Cancer too is a really good time for healing relationships with family. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people have had a lot of rifts in their family, since COVID or
Yeah.
over politics or and so it really is a good time, I think, even if it's one-sided, to
Mm-hmm.
do the work of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think anytime you have Jupiter in Cancer, you can think about caring for others and you know caring for yourself, nurturing, and that really does have a lot to do with forgiveness sometimes. So maybe a
Yeah.
forgiveness practice.
Yeah, and now that you say that too, that might also be a good time if you want to give more to your local community, like your in-person communities. If you want to like volunteer at a food bank, or if there's something you've been thinking about along those lines, June could be a good month to look into that.
Yeah. And also, it would be a great time for connecting with nature and
Mhm.
planning any kind of trips around the beach for the summer. And this is like a really, Jupiter in Cancer is going to make anything near water feel very healing.
Yeah, and I would also recommend two people plan like vacations or spiritual retreats, either for July or September because of all the things that are happening those 2 months as well. So June would be a good time to start lining that sort of thing up.
Awesome. Awesome. And now Uranus goes into Gemini. Does that go in June or July? I don't have my notes.
July 7th, and it's
Okay.
like days after Neptune retrogrades, July 4th. So like the first week of July, I'm like, ooh, that's probably a good week for a vacation.
Yeah, I think that Uranus in Gemini is going to be really like buzzy energy. So July might be really busy and it might be
Yeah.
filled with a lot of different kinds of obligations that we're not used to. It's going to be a very different energy. Anytime Uranus moves into a new sign, which it's been in here for since 2018 in Taurus. So this is going to
Yes.
be really very different and like your mind is going to be buzzing. So this might be a really good time to sign up for courses, sign up for anything where you want to learn, like anything you've always wanted to learn. That seems like a good time for that.
Yeah, and Mercury is going to go retrograde the second half of July.
Okay,
So
so do it in the first half.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Or at least sign up for it in the first
Sign
half.
up for it in the first
Probably,
half.
it's probably okay
Exactly.
to take it during the actual retrograde. That might
Like,
actually be a good time to
plan.
do a course actually when
Yeah,
you're
and
learning.
Mercury retrograde, I know people say you shouldn't travel, but it's actually not a bad time for vacations because you're
Yeah.
doing less things like on your computer and like there's less deliverables and things like that, which is kind of nice. Like you give your brain a break on
Hmm.
vacation. So if you're, if you understand that there might be some travel snafus, but there's travel snafus even when it's not Mercury retrograde. So that's what I always say. It's just like plan your life.
Yeah, they just tend to be more of them. I just always remind people just give yourself extra time if you are traveling during a Mercury retrograde and just be more mindful because people can just be a little bit more checked out. So
Right, right. Okay, so any other tips for July that you wanted to highlight?
no, I think we're good. Yeah, I think July is another great month for vacations as well.
Okay. All right. August.
Yeah, and then there isn't actually much happening in August, and that's Leo season again. So I think that's a great time for first time launches. Like if you've been thinking about launching like a new program or a new project, you can plan it, of course, ahead of time. But I think August, anytime in August would be great, like book releases, new courses,
Yeah,
that kind of thing
anytime
as
that
well.
when Mercury goes retrograde in August, or when it goes direct,
Mhm.
that would be a good time to launch because Leo season is a good time to put yourself front and center and to let
Mhm.
yourself shine a little bit. And also we're gonna have all of this, Gemini, Uranus and Gemini is gonna be very electric, and
Yes.
you're gonna see so much in the news. Like
Hmm.
things that we cannot even begin to comprehend right now are going to start to make themselves known by summer. And
Yeah.
that's going to be exciting. It might make us a little nervous, but this is just all kind of part of the ride that we're on for 2025.
Yeah. And I also think it's going to be interesting too to see the art, the music, the movies that come out around that time. I think
Yeah.
there's going to be a whole culture shift there. And I think that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, yeah, and also I think it's a time of clarity too, where we realize that we've been in this time of like duality where we don't with Jupiter and Gemini and also Neptune and Pisces, where things feel foggy. We don't know what to pick, and I think that there is with Uranus moving into Gemini a sense of like we're gonna have to make a choice. Like we're
Hmm.
gonna have to make some choices and some decisions, and then we'll stick. That can energize us to actually finally, put our flag in the sand. Like this is what's going to happen. This is where I stand. This is what's going to happen. This is who I am. And like with Leo
Yeah.
too, that this is who I am. Take it or leave it.
Exactly. And Leo season is also another good time to do like the physical upgrade. Like if you want to redo the wardrobe, the hair, the makeup, Leo season is also great for that too.
Great, great. All right, let's look at the fall now. We're into the fall.
Yeah, and September is kind of a doozy because we have Saturn retrograding back into Pisces September 1st, and then Uranus is going to retrograde September 6th. So I'm like, and then we have eclipses in September as well. So
So September
again,
might be a time of a lot of, kind of going backwards a little bit, right? Like we felt like we were on our path, and now we have to kind of take a step back and retool and see what the eclipses are gonna, like how they're gonna shake up our lives.
exactly. Like, and you might end up like going back to something that popped up during the March eclipses, something that you did earlier in the year might have to be redone in a different way, or there might be another tangent from it that you didn't expect. I think September is going to invite us to be very flexible and open minded. I guess that's the nicest way to put it.
Okay. All right. All right. So then we move into October.
Okay. And then now we're going to have Pluto moving direct. And then we also have Neptune retrograding into Pisces. And again, I feel like October is another good month where you can get stuff done either in terms of decluttering, doing those renovation projects. Like maybe you didn't have time to do it earlier in the year, or maybe the resources. October will be a good time to do that. And again, another good time for launches, book releases, new projects, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Pluto Direct is also a really good time to maybe find a therapist, find
Oh,
anything where there, internal renovations, right? Like, it's like
mm,
how do we renovate our psyche in some ways? And so I love that that you brought up renovations, because I think it goes hand in hand with kind of the recognition that, like, okay, we are going to learn a lot this summer, but then we're going to kind of get thrown back into a little bit more of the early 2025 energy. And so maybe reflecting on, like, okay, so what went well, what didn't, what do I need to clean up that I wasn't prepared for? And that's kind of where, that's sort of the energy of the roller coaster, right? It's like we're building up to this summer, and then like all of a sudden there's like this giant slide, like we're kind of coming into the fall where it's like, oh, we're back where we were.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All
Anything
right.
soon stuff.
So before we know it, then November, December, we're back to the holidays. So y'all have a Christmas tree. We'll have you back next year, and we'll talk about 2026. But what are we looking at for that part of the year?
Well, I was thinking for November, like, can't we just end the year October 31st? Like, what's the point for like, because we have the Jupiter retrograde, and then we have Mercury retrograde, and we have Saturn turning direct all in November. And like, I think the energy is going to be really slow and heavy in November. And like, people are going to be like, I'm done with this year. Like, I
Okay.
just want to like wrap it up.
All right. So we hate to break that to you, everyone, that this might be a year of a lot of progression forward, but then like feeling like we're kind of pulled backward, and just really wanting to see what's on the other side in 2026. And 2026 does have a lot of juicy transits, but we won't talk about those right now.
Right. Yeah.
But
But November is Scorpio
like the
season.
2025 is the setup for 2026. It's where we get the flavor of what's to come for the next decade or more, and we're not really out of the woods as far as like being bounced around by the cosmos until probably the 2030s. So that's a little something to hang your hat on for Christmas or Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, or whatever you
Yeah.
celebrate.
Yeah. But I was going to say for that November, especially since it is Scorpio season, it's another time to ramp up the therapy, the shadow work. And with those retrogrades and Saturn slowing down, it'll be a really good time to maybe do some of the harder emotional work, maybe repairing friendships, family relationships at a new level. I think 2025 is going to bring a lot more rifts and divisions in our close relationships. And maybe that November, December, we'll have the time and the space to begin to repair some of that.
Yeah, and Jupiter in Cancer, you know, Jupiter in Cancer will be happening this whole year, beginning in the summer. And so it's a year-long transit. And so it is kind of a process of reconnecting with loved ones and doing the emotional work of nurturing yourself and recognizing where others that you love may need some tender loving care too.
Hmm.
I think globally, or at least, here in the US, there is kind of potentially an increase in nationalism and tribalism, which we've already been experiencing. And I think with Uranus going into Gemini, we may see a bit more of a bifurcation where it's like, you're for this, I'm for that. And how are we going to get along? How are we going to get past this? So,
Yeah, but I think a big part of that, and I've heard other astrologers talk about this too, that a big piece of that is really focusing on healing men in particular in our culture. And for I think that's a big theme for 2025. And I think that also starts with us healing our own inner wounded masculine as well. Like I think there's going to be the need to do that work.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I did the video that women will decide the election, and in a lot of ways they did, because a lot of them
Mhm.
stayed home. It was really a lot of people that had voted one way in the past, just didn't show up to vote, and or they switched to a different party. And so I think there is something about having to look at the genders, and we're going to have a lot of masculine, fast yang energy coming our way. How do we integrate that in a healthy way, and how do we support that energy in ourselves and in our children? So yeah. All right, Darice. Well, this is really interesting. Great little
Yeah, this is
overview for
fun.
everybody so they see what's coming and just kind of how to work with the energy. Anything else that you want to add? Or again, I will put Darice's information below. You can check out her YouTube channel. You can check out her membership. I believe she's got like a special on astrology readings right now. Anything else?
Well, I was going to say with my free school community, it's an opportunity for people to come together. Definitely that Pluto and Aquarius ethic, and because there's going to be so many challenges over the next few years, I wanted to create a space where people can learn from astrology, how to utilize it to make their lives easier, but also where they could communicate with one another, share their successes, share their struggles. We can learn from each other. And I think that's what's going to really get us through these very difficult, challenging years, especially 2025, 2026, is the more community, the better. Like we have to work on ourselves, within ourselves, and we also have to be able to work with other people as well and be supported as we do that. And so I just wanted to do my part to like just make that happen.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for watching. And as always, the universe is conspiring to help us, and there's a reason and a season for it all. So until next time, stargazers, have a good holiday.